What's up, party animals? Welcome to episode 85 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. Why did it take me so long to do a Mario Party episode? I have no idea. But you know what? 85 episodes in, we finally got around to it, right? Not too bad. Well, you're probably going to be seeing a lot more Mario Party episodes because after I was done with this one, I found that the developers do a lot of really cool stuff with Mario Party. So with that said, let's get started with the first Mario Party episode on Boundary Break. So with Mario Party, my job's pretty much cut out for me. I could just spend a total of 10 minutes just zooming out most of these minigames because a lot of them have controlled cameras, which gives them really interesting looking environments. They're oftentimes very bite-sized like the games themselves. And sure, I might show you a few of them here and there, but the challenge then becomes, can we do something a little bit more with this? Can we instead pack this episode in with a whole bunch of oddities? And so that's what's going to end up being the focus here. Like for example, this arcade room for the minigames. Yeah, I mean like zooming it out and showing you what's on the reflection side that seems to be a little bit out of place is kind of interesting. But if we were to zoom the camera all the way into Toad's hand, I don't know why this is here. It never gets used in this scene in any sort of way. But out of all the characters shown, there seems to be a paper airplane type of geometry stuck in his hand. In other words, there are two tries stuck together. And it becomes more apparent what the shape of this is on the reflective side because one of those tries becomes a different color, separating a sort of distinction from the other try that it's connected to. In the Chomp Wash minigame, there's a little bit of a technical goof on the developer's part. People often mistake me for saying that developer techniques somehow make them lazy or incorrect in some way, but that would be totally false. This is actually the first time ever I would admit that the developers did something wrong. And that's that the grass and the flowers don't meet in the environment here. And so even in normal gameplay, you could see the black void before the minigame starts, but it becomes even more apparent if we zoom the camera out and take a look at the environment from up above. Another unusual thing here is the Chain Chomp house seems to have eraser marks on the roof for no reason, though this is something that you would not be able to see as the player, as the design camera paths never allow you to see them at those angles. Also, inside of the Chain Chomp house, you can see that the rug that is on the floor is also matching on its ceiling. And you know what? Speaking of things that you can only see by taking the camera inside of the building, let's take a look at bumper balloons. Inside of the garage over here, you'll see a whole bunch of objects like tires and crates. And all of this is never shown to the player because those garage doors never open. Now, as far as Koopas and Goombas go, there's something kind of fun off in the distance here. Since these guys on the carousel are so far off in the distance, the developers put in low poly models for both the Goomba and the Koopa Troopa. Now, the Goomba's kind of funny because his eyebrows are a dark brown instead of black for some reason. And the Koopa Troopa is much easier to see in its entire body because there's one off screen that doesn't have a cart. And one easy way to tell that this is a low poly model is by the jagged fingers he has raised in the air. But with the Goombas, there's a much bigger discovery to unveil. In the collection's hub area, there exists a Goomba that would never be seen by the player. Way outside the boundaries, all the way into the void, you can find a lonely Goomba. And no, not the YouTube character personality, an actual in-game Goomba that seems to be disconnected from the entire game. What is he doing here? Well, we'll never know. That typically seems to be the case with a lot of lost relics in games. Oh yeah, make it a double new discovery here on Boundary Break. There's also a blue curtain behind the carts that gets left completely unused. And not only that, it seems to have its looping animation for both the curtain itself as well as the wrinkles in the curtain just in front of it. And just in case any skeptics are sharing any doubt, the only curtain used in this room is a red one with a completely different pattern. Now I want to do a zoom out of the Star Carnival. This is the hub area of Mario Party 8, and the developers put a lot of work into the presentation of it. I'm really surprised at how many 2D sprites can be on the screen at once. But anyways, when we zoom out the map, we can see that the skybox is made up of a cylinder, and then you also might notice that there is a square texture of a sky underneath the stage as well. This is in fact to represent the bodies of water that are in a few places in the Star Carnival to give a reflective look. Also, those Paragoombas that show the sign and then go off into the sky, where do those guys end up? Well, just off camera, they don't seem to be going anywhere. In fact, they never despawn or get called out. They just stay in place until you select a new mode. And one other thing I wanted to show you is the flower beds in the back of the carnival. Now, if you have a keen eye, you can see some of the objects that these flowers make up, which is Super Mario Bros. Sprites. But at no point in the game can you get a full look at all the sprites in one shot, so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to show you guys that right now. One of the things that I noticed that happens in Mario Party 8 that doesn't happen in a whole lot of games is outside the boundaries of a lot of these areas, they seem to use FMVs and other static images in the void and then called to reference inside of the map itself. It's so strange to ever see something like this inside the void though. Like of all the examples you've been seeing on the screen just now, but not limited to something like the scoreboard for the bowling minigame. When I started pulling the camera back for the first time, I was shocked. I didn't understand what was happening here. Needless to say, after so many episodes, seeing something like this is incredibly unusual and incredibly uncommon. But I suppose the developers had no problem doing this because the camera is so controlled in these games. So there's no fear or worry that the player is going to be able to manipulate the camera in such a way that you'd be able to see these things in the void, unless it was something like the Chomp Wash minigame where the void was exposed anyway. Alright, so the amount of stuff that I could show you in this one minigame alone is insane. First off, the cards initially spawn right in front of this cube, which means for the first time on the show you can see the purpose of these mysterious cubes, with this one having the function of spawning the cards. After which you can see the cards are stored all at once in these few positions, and then one by one each card is being pulled away from the pile. And down below the ground you can see the characters' balls being stored before they get shot off onto the cards. But even more surprising than that is that the environment for this area is fully modeled even though the camera will never show any of this. Like for instance, the ceiling seems to have its own picture that's never seen by the player, and it's made specifically for the ceiling, because if you were to take the camera outside into the void, there's a more generic texture where all the pillars meet. Alright, but since we're outside in the void right now, let's look at something else. A huge discovery, unused environment for this area. That's right, apparently the developers had the intention of having environments outside of those doorways, and later changed their minds and didn't even texture any of this environment that's on the outside, because it's never going to be seen by the player, and instead they just patched up those doorways with some textured curtains. The Mario Matrix minigame is really cool, because when you start the game you're in a computer lab, and then the characters are transported into the computer screen, and then the camera zooms in on the computer screen, and then you're doing the minigame. However, if we were to pan our own camera out, you can see the computer lab is inside of the Matrix, and the environment that is the Matrix is a long cylinder. Speaking of long cylinders, and wow, is that a terrible segue. If we take a spin on over to Rotation Station, we can see that the top platform that the player normally stands on after they complete the minigame has a doubled up platform well above the environment. And a lot of you might be thinking to yourselves, this is where the character's probably going to just end up warping to when it shows the victory screen. And you'd be wrong actually. For some reason, this platform is never used to showcase anything. Also, in the minigame Attention Grabber, there's this opening cutscene where the camera pans through these woods and then it opens up and shows your character at the end of the island. This is a pretty awesome and elaborate scene, and it doesn't even get called out when the minigame starts, which is great because if we take the camera back there, we can see that animation of the bushes parting is on a continuous loop. And while we're here, we'll also take a look at some birds. Haven't done one of these in a while, but it used to be a segment on the show to showcase some of the birds that fly around in video games because you oftentimes don't get to see them up close, but the developers, for whatever reason, put a lot of detail into them, and I don't know why. And this is a great example of that. This bird in the minigame Attention Grabber is a hawk, and although it's very unlikely that you, the player, would see the details of the hawk like its eye over here, the developers did in fact put a lot of polygons and some decent textures on top of this thing. So there's a couple more mini games I want to show you here. One involves the Monty Moles, and I love the way it works with this one. Because you got one Monty Mole that starts off the opening cutscene, and you'll never be able to see him again, but he stays underneath the ground the entire time, along with the other Monty Moles. Now, if you hit a Monty Mole, he stays underneath the ground rubbing his head, and the other Monty Moles are in a frozen position until they're ready to spring back up again, which just makes for a magnificent cluster underneath the ground. And of course, for the minigame In a Nick of Time, it has a very interesting environment, though the camera never pans over to the right wall. Pretty odd because there are a whole bunch of clocks here, so it certainly had nothing to hide. In fact, the most embarrassing thing they have in this map is right out in the open. For some reason, this one cuckoo clock here has a cuckoo bird that is stuck on the outside of the door. This cuckoo clock never animates at any point, and unlike the hawk texture that you saw a moment ago that was just magnificent, this poor little guy seems to be a little lump-sided. And in the minigame Lava or Leave 'em, I just wanted to show you where the lava comes from, as well as where the characters end up going when they get hit by the lava. As it turns out, when they fly up off screen, the character model still exists in the game. They're just hanging there, continuously mending to their burning backsides. And although there isn't too much to show you in the minigame Shake It Up, the stage is set in such a way that it looks like you want to be able to explore it. So I figured we could just do a zoom out of it and show all of you just how much there is to this environment. And in the Mosh Pit Playroom, there's a ton of environment that's never seen by the player, and what is possibly the most unusual thing of all is that on the right wall, there's a textured photograph of a table with a red block on it, which just seems to mimic the actual table and red block that exists in the playroom itself. And I believe the table is textured with that same image because you can see a relic of the red block texture laying behind the regular red block. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching news for the channel. Again, this is the last reminder. I'm going to be at PAX East this year. On Friday, I'm going to have a panel. So if you're going, check that itinerary. I'm going to be doing it with A+ Start and Beta 64. I believe that's all of our first public appearances in one place. So feel free to stop by the panel, say hello. We'll probably do some autographs, which to me sounds so bizarre. I can't really imagine anybody really wanting my autograph, to be frank with you. But as far as news for the channel, we're going to be doing Bloodborne soon, apparently. That's pretty cool. I'm not sure the Bloodborne fans are watching this week's episode, but if you happen to be sneaking in here, hey, there you go, man. Also, Spyro is another one that's probably going to be next week. I'll let you know. I'm always full of surprises, so unfortunately, it's the luck of the die. And I'm the die guy. This is a terrible analogy. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week and at PAX. So, later.